Hi, everyone. My name is Jolly, and I am host of the Jolly Abraham Show. And today I have my good friend with me, Jill Smith. Jill is happily married, and she is the mother of two beautiful children, ages 10 and 7. Her background is in health and nutrition, and she's been doing that for about 10 years. She has been a truth seeker most of her life. Jill has gone from being a Baptist as a child to being an agnostic believer to New Age and now back home to Christ. She has now completely turned her life over to Jesus and is on mission to share her testimony of how he worked in her life to expose the truth. Her goal is to share her testimony with others so that they too can be helped and return to Jesus. Jill, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jolly. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I am so excited for this interview because we have known each other from high school. We were good friends. We were friends, I would say. We didn't run in the same circles, but I think I knew of you, and I believed, you knew of me. And, we were Facebook friends, obviously, right? And then I remember what I knew of you is you would post things about nutrition, you'd post things about New Age, because that's when I believe we became Facebook friends again. And then, you went MIA for like a year. And then just recently, I just started, the first picture I saw of you was you and your family being baptized. And I was like, oh my goodness, what the heck happened? So what I'd love to do is just kind of go over your story, your redemptive story of how the journey that took place in your life from when you were little and how you came back to Christ. So let's start with how you were raised. Like, tell me about your upbringing.
Well, Jolly, I was raised, actually in South Lakeland, really close to where you grew up. And my parents were married, and I had an older brother. And as far as religion went, my parents did take us to church. Like you said, we went to a Baptist church. And I remember, like, at one point, my father, he felt like there was some agenda in the church around, like, financial pressure, and just saw like some things that he would get irritated with. And so then I remember we went to church at somebody's house. There was like another member of the church who started to just gather a smaller group at their home. And so we would go to that. And then there was a church near my house that I would actually just walk to. As a child, I would just walk there with my friends, and we would go and do church there. And so it was never really like, I wouldn't say my parents were like extreme about religion, but there was some sort of like a foundation where we were exposed to Jesus. And, for a while we went, and then that kind of tapered off as I got older. It just kind of tapered off and was kind of left to my own like devices, I guess you could say.
Sure. And so then how did you go from being a Baptist, raised as a Baptist, to being an agnostic?
I would say that when I graduated high school, well, obviously through my preteen and teen years, I definitely was heavily influenced by the culture. Yeah. It was no longer cool to be a Christian, like there was all these influences with movies and our music and everything that was, I felt like now as an adult looking back, it was a program, right? There was this program of like this very sexualized nature, alcohol and drugs, like these songs that we would listen to on the radio that are kind of saying, oh, go to the club and drink and dance and shake your booty and do all these things. And I got completely swept into that culture. And, I think in high school, you probably knew, like, I kind of had, this little party girl thing going on. And so I was very easily swept into that. And then when I graduated high school, I wasn't, really clear on what I wanted to do with my life. I did feel like going to college would be a good idea. I think I took a year or two off. I started bartending, and I started going to college. And, honestly, the college, I felt, the one that I went to anyways, there were some classes that I took, and I already was kind of like, my relationship with God had already kind of like wavered, of course. And then they would present things to me that I felt like were proving the things that the Bible taught, like historically, as, kind of discrediting the Bible. And I was like, I just remember having these thoughts like, well, if this is not true, if one detail in the Bible is not accurate, then I'm going to have to just throw the whole thing away, because, if I can't believe this one part, then how can I believe any of it, right? So it's like throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. So I was just like, all right, well, fine then. But inside of me, there was always this like seed of like, there's something, but what is it? Like, it's hard for me to believe that there's like nothing. But what is it? Like, because now I don't believe this because my college professors are saying this thing. And so I'm throwing this idea away, but like, there's just something inside of my heart that was like, yeah, but there's just still something.
Sure. So you were saying in college is where they begin to teach the Bible historically, but they were just talking at it from a history standpoint and not necessarily teaching the Bible. Is that correct?
Yeah, it wasn't like a Bible college, but it was some, I can't even remember the class now. It wasn't like oceanography, but it was some sort of like, just speaking of the earth and the early stages of the earth. And like, when they start to speak of the age of the earth and all of these things, right? It starts to kind of like misalign with, the Bible saying the earth was created at this point. And you know what I mean? So even with the timeline being off, I was like, if that's not true, then how can I believe the rest of the story if it starts out with what I'm being taught as a lie, basically?
Sure. So then you thought to yourself, there's something missing, like it's still not like the whole truth. So then how did you go from being an agnostic to New Age? Like how long would you say you were an agnostic and then you went as a New Age believer?
Well, I would say that anywhere from my late teens and then my early 20s, I actually did marry. I got married in my early 20s. I was married for 3 years and divorced. And his family was a believer. And, they were good people. There was a lot of, I felt like, judgment in that realm, like where I was seeing it as judgment. And that kind of put me off a little bit further from all of that. And that's around the time when I was going to college. And then, I still strayed for a few more years, just really not having a lot of thoughts about any of it, just sort of like drifting, and then my current husband, when I connected with him, we were actually connected in high school as well. And I hadn't seen him for like 12 years. Mm-hmm. And he was basically like an antagonistic atheist at the time, super highly intelligent guy. Right. And when he was younger, he would go to church and just always felt this like guilty, shamey sort of thing going on. And then because he was really intelligent, he had a lot of questions. And then when he tried to ask anybody to answer his questions, like nothing would satisfy him. Like nobody could really get on his level and like speak to him to where he could like have an understanding, instead of just saying, well, this is just the way it is. This is just the way it is. And that just wasn't ever acceptable for him. Right. Sure. So, me not really having a strong faith, and then him being kind of like an atheist at the time, I didn't really have a standard for like, I have to draw this godly man into my life. That wasn't my standard because I wasn't a strong believer. Right. So because I didn't really believe fully anything, and he really didn't have a belief at all, but he still didn't have this like fear of death that I had at the time. Cause I struggled for a lot of years with, like at nighttime, I would get panic attacks, and I would literally like hyperventilate, like laying in bed, just thinking about death, and he never had that. So it was really interesting how, even though he had no belief of God, he still had this like, I don't know, this like steadiness inside of himself, where it was just really interesting. I'm like, how can you not believe anything, but you have no fear of the afterlife or whatever comes after this or whatever that is. And he's always been a very, growth mindset person, like into personal development hardcore. Like he was always like an athlete and always striving to be better. And that really aligned with me because, I just like really grasped onto that, so we got together And it wasn't like, we did a lot of drinking and all that and partying when we got together, but there was still this like, we're moving forward. We're going to move in a forward direction with our lives, even, regardless of what that is. And so we kind of just jumped in together, and leading to the new age, to answer your question, we had our son, and then after we had our daughter, I really was struggling. And a couple of years before that, my husband got into meditation. And that was actually through athletics, because he'd read all these books, and Phil Jackson from the Los Angeles Lakers, right? He was really big into teaching mindfulness to his athletes, and it was actually enhancing their physical performance. And so I think he had read a book about that and had kind of dove in, and he's like, well, what's up with that? Like, I'm into all like that personal development type thing, and I want to be a higher performer. So, and he also noticed there was like anger inside that he kind of had suppressed. So he started to meditate. And I think for about 2 years he was meditating when we had our daughter. And I was never really into it. I was like, as you can probably tell, I'm like a high energy person. So like sit and be still was like the very last thing that I was interested in.
Sure.
As a mom, we're like, we have to do laundry, we have to clean, like there's all these to-do lists. Like I don't have time to just sit and be still,
Yeah.
So I was not interested in meditating with him. And but after I had my daughter, I got really deep into postpartum depression, sleep deprivation, and just, I was staying home with both of my children, like a 2.5-year-old at the time and a newborn. And I got super, super depressed and I just like developed this really intense anxiety. And so one day my husband looks at me and he's like, babe, please just sit with me and meditate for 5 minutes. And I like had all this resistance. I'm like, no, I can't. And then I was like, I saw the like desperation in his eyes, like, please meditate with me.
Right.
And I was like, all right, I'll do it.
Yeah.
So I did. And I sat with him and we meditated for 5 minutes, and, and I had seen some changes in him. I had seen him becoming like a more patient father and, not as like triggered as easily. And I had seen some like positive change in him. So I was like, all right, well, this is obviously like doing some good for him. So I'll give it a try. And so little by little, I started meditating with him. And then very quickly I got into yoga, and so that was kind of the gateway drug that kind of really pulled me into the new age,
Okay. So really quick, Jill, for our viewers, I'd love for you to just kind of define or tell me individually, like, what does being an agnostic mean versus an atheist versus new age? Like, can you differentiate those three for our viewers?
Sure.
What's the difference?
So basically, if you're an atheist, you have no belief in anything beyond this realm, in the spiritual realm. There's like nothing besides this earthly plane, there's
Okay.
nothing else. When you die, you're just done. Like you're dust. That's it. Agnostic, is this sense of like, you're not like you don't have any religion or spiritual power that you're claiming, but you believe that there is something beyond this realm spiritually. You just haven't defined what it is.
Okay.
Right. And then for me, like my exposure to like the new age, it's not really just one thing. It's really a collection of all different sorts of beliefs. Because for me, the way that I view it is just that you're kind of into a lot of different things. So for me, that looked like I got into yoga. I got into, energy healing of all sorts. Like I studied a little bit of shamanism, Reiki, the angel cards. There's just so many different things, crystal healing.
Wow.
Just so many different things. And yeah, it's almost like, I don't really know where it begins and ends, but I just know that it's almost as if like, it's just a whole bunch of different beliefs. And it ended up for me being almost, a little bit confusing because, it's not like you have this foundation. So, you're open to pretty much like everything.
Okay. So you're open to everything, but you're not necessarily committed to one thing. Would you
That's
say
how it
that?
was for me. That was my experience with it personally. Yeah. It
Okay.
started with yoga, and then it's just pretty quickly you're like learning about the chakra system, and then you're learning about energy and energy healing, and this other spiritual realm where you have spiritual spirit guides and helpers, and I will say, my intention going in was to find healing, because I was suffering. I was suffering with postpartum. I didn't have control over my nervous system. Like I had anxiety, anger, just all of these things. So I was really looking for a remedy, really to heal myself from, past trauma. And that's really how it kind of will like get you and pull you in there, because we all have been traumatized in some way, right? We all
Sure.
have these things that affect us, maybe from childhood or whatever. And so I went into it fully with just wanting to heal myself, wanting to heal myself, and empower myself to be a better person. So I went into it with complete like good intentions, just for my own healing, so I could be a better mom, a better wife, a better human, you know. Um,
And did you
yeah.
find that whenever you went into New Age that it healed you in those areas that you felt like were lacking or you needed healing in?
I did feel that in a lot of ways. I did feel like it was strengthening me. Um, I learned how to breathe properly, right? And so a lot of us don't even know how to take a proper breath. We're doing this
Sure.
thing called reverse breathing. And that was a big thing for me. I was like, oh my gosh, I've been reverse breathing my whole life. And now I actually know how to take a full breath into my diaphragm. Yoga would actually strengthen my body. I was standing up taller with my shoulders back and down, like my posture changed. There were some definite positive physical and emotional benefits that I would feel from doing those things. Yes.
Okay. And so how long were you a New Ager, would you say?
About 7 years. So my daughter's almost 8, and she was, not even a year old when I really got into like the whole yoga and meditation scene.
Okay, so now your husband's a New Ager, you're a New Ager at this point, and things are good, would you say? Things are decent. How would you say life was?
I noticed that when I first started going to yoga, I really felt like relief. I would just go, and I would like they have this thing at the end called shavasana, and I would lay there and just cry. I would just like lay there and cry, and it was like a moment where I could go and find this like stillness and the
Yeah.
silence, and really learn to control my breath and my breathing and allow that to flow with like the movements of my body. And so I did feel that there was some positive benefit. But what I noticed is that, like, say I would go on a Tuesday, the week would pass. I maybe wouldn't do yoga like every single day. But by that next Tuesday, I would be in this place where I was like desperate to go again, because I'm just like, like I'm on the ground in the fetal position crying because life is just so overwhelming. And then like he'd look at me like, go to yoga.
Sure. Okay. So then what would you say, Jill, was the turning point for you in your faith walk, your faith journey? Like what did it? Because if things weren't bad, they were good, you would say. So what was the change? How did it happen?
Well, so what I just described to you was sort of my early experience, right? And
Okay.
so, this continued on for another 6, 7 years, to where I got into like Buddhism. My husband got into that. Like I would say he's more like mindfulness meditation, and Buddhist is kind of like where he ventured into, where we would do different meditations where like these, but they call bodhisattvas, like enlightened beings would actually offer healing for you. Um, did several empowerments at Buddhist temples. I, did a program for shamanism. My yoga training was actually merged with shamanism. And I mean, chakra, energy healing, Reiki, like it just went into all these other realms where, like I said, the intention is pretty much the same. It's about healing. But what I think over time, like I just saw so many different things, right? Like here's an example. Like I have a friend one time, and she did like an energy healing session in her house.
Okay.
And then after this, like her son starts having nightmares, right? Her son starts having nightmares. And you know, so like these little things would just start happening to where it's like you're not really fully saying this is bad, but you like it's almost like there's like a little check notepad, like a little
Yeah.
checklist in my back pocket where I'm like, okay, well, this feels good. But then I was like, this is happening. Okay, like I'm going to take note of that, but I'm going to stick it back in my pocket and not really give it a lot of power. Cause then you're like, you're burning sage. Like, all right, well, now we're going to burn sage and all the negative energies that are being released. We're going to clear them out with like burning sage or whatever, you know?
Okay.
You know, and then I saw some things, you know, not that these things don't perpetuate other arenas. I'm not going to say that. Like a lot of people are influenced by infidelity, and they're influenced by like suicide can come into your life, whether you're a Christian or whether you're an agnostic and atheist, it doesn't really matter, you know, but coming to these places for this like true healing. And you know, I lost friends over like envy and jealousy, big time, a lot of envy and jealousy I saw in that realm, and competitiveness of like, you know, these little things. And then I saw a lot of greed, you know. I had some spiritual teachers that I would follow that would end up just charging like thousands, like $10,000, $15,000, charging people to be like coached by them and stuff. And I'm just like, you know, it just started to kind of not feel right to me. It's kind of like, what's going on here? Like, you know, and then some of the experiences that I had with some of those coaches, it's like some of the advice I felt like I was getting, I didn't feel like it was good advice. Like inside of myself, it's like, I don't actually agree with that at all.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah.
like that doesn't feel like what's right for my family. Thank you for your advice, but I don't align with what you're saying. Like, I don't feel like that's right for my children, and things like that would start to happen. And then it's almost like doing a drug or something. Like you have to keep doing the drug to get high. Right.
Okay.
So for me, it's like, you really start diving deeper, right? And now you have all of these expectations. Okay. So here's like just an idea of what I'm saying, right? You integrate this nutrition because nutrition is a part of it too. So now you have to eat clean, right? You have to get up and meditate every day. You have to do your yoga practice, right? Chant this mantra 100 times forward and backward, you know, like do this breath work. You know, do the body brushing, this, you know, brushing your skin brushing, and, you know, use your essential oils, and then clear your chakras with crystals and play the singing bowl. It's like, it's almost like so much, like we already have so much going on. And I would feel this sense of like overwhelm, and then like followed by shame and guilt. Like, oh my gosh, like I could barely get out of bed today to take care of my kids, but I didn't do my yoga practice. I didn't do my meditation practice. I don't have time to juice or make this organic, vegan, whatever. You know, it's like sometimes we don't have all that. And then so it would become this perpetuating cycle of like feeling guilty that I'm not doing the work, doing these things, right?
Sure.
And so that just got freaking exhausting for me, Jolly. I'm telling you, like if it would go like a week and I hadn't done yoga, I'm like, I'm failing as a human,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, totally.
And it was just like, and then you start to compile like so many different practices from so many different things, like this Buddhist practice with this meditation practice, with this yoga practice. And it's like, I'd almost wake up and be like, what practice am I supposed to do today?
Right.
I don't know if I'm supposed to do the medicine Buddha mantra, or if I'm supposed to do this like yoga flow, or if I should just sit in meditation in silence for an hour. Like, I don't know which one to do.
Sure.
So it became chaotic and confusing for me, you know? And then still after 7 years, like I would still have all this rage.
Wow.
You know, like my children, they're the reason I got into this, because I wanted to be better for them.
Wow.
Okay. After 7 years, I noticed like because I was always like observing myself, you know, just because you're, you know, you can still freak out and observe yourself, but that doesn't mean you're not freaking out. And like a little thing would maybe happen and trigger me, right? And then I'm just like taking it to the next level. Like I am freaking out on them at this level that just really didn't match like what was happening. Like there was no reason that my response should have been that extreme, of something so small.
Sure.
And so then I would lash out at them, and then I would just feel horrible. And I'm just like, after a while, I'm like, okay, so I'm this yoga instructor and this meditator. I mean, I did a silent retreat where I was silent for like 9 days and
Wow.
meditated. Like you do like 100 hours of meditation and you're, silent. So it's like, how many empowerments do I have to do? How many meditations do I have to do? How many yoga practices do I have to do before I can stop being this monster in the closet, right? Like, what is it going to take? Like, it's exhausting, freaking exhausting.
Wow, that's so good. As you're talking, I just hear that you had to, it seemed very ritualistic. It seemed very like religion, rote, you have to do X, Y, and Z, X number of times a week or per day. You had to do all these different things to achieve, to feel. You couldn't just be, there was no necessarily foundation. It was just a lot of grabbing things from different people, different practices, different teachings. Is that correct?
For sure.
Yeah, it sounds.
And my mind would just be like, I'm confused right now. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know which way to go. I don't know which practice to use today. I kind of found like it was hard to just do one practice because now you've kind of fallen into like 80 different things. Like which mantra do I say today?
Yeah. So there was a lot of shame and a lot of guilt with not doing the right things, or that.
Oh, yeah. It was always this thing like, we're doing the work, you're doing the work, we're doing the work, and man, like I was already doing so much work just to keep my family intact, to keep my children dressed, bathed, clothed, my house clean, like just these basic things that we already have on our shoulders that are kind of a lot already, right? Like I was already trying to do all of that. And so doing all of this too was just like, it got to the point where it was just too much. And on top of it, when I did it, I was like, still not like, I didn't feel like I was becoming like really that much of a better person.
Right. Which was the whole intent of starting this journey, right? With your kids.
Yeah, it was to be a better mom. And then I felt like I was like almost a worse mom because I'm like, anger was just lashing out at them like left and right over just nothing,
Sure. So what did you do? Like, who did you talk to? Did you confide in anybody, or was this just like an internal battle that you were just struggling with yourself? Like, what was that turning point for you?
Well, my husband, he's always like, I gotta say, through our whole journey together, like he's always just been absolutely like amazing, like emotionally, like supportive. I have like tons of friends in the new age that, were like sisters to me. And so sometimes I would go to them just depending on what it was, and the timing of it. But I always did have him, like he's definitely been the rock, in my life. And he's never been a real shamey kind of person. And so I could always cry in his arms, and he would remind me that I was a good mom, and he would never hold those things against me. And so that's always just been a really beautiful part about our connection.
Yeah, that is awesome. That's so great. So what would you say? How did you go from being a new ager then to coming back to Jesus? Like, tell me what that journey was.
Well, there's a few, obviously it's not just like one thing that happened, but I will say I had, there was one particular couple that I love them so much and love their family, and our kids were like BFFs. And they got into the new age with me. Like I met them at this event and like we just kind of dove in together to all these things.
Sure.
Well, they kind of like, I guess, had their own experience, and they were always believed in Jesus, like especially before the new age, and kind of like hung on to him throughout, but we're still doing all of these other things.
Okay.
And then I guess just like got completely under spiritual attack. And everybody kind of thought they were nuts because they like their lease on their house was up. So they moved and took their family and like moved from like campground to campground for like the whole summer, and completely renounced everything and went to Jesus. Wow. So I was like watching this and I'm like, at first, like watching it, like, what, what, like triggered.
So
yeah. yeah, like, how are they going to renounce all this? Like all these times we had these special healing moments and like, and so I just completely thought they were like confused, and crazy and whatever, but I also knew their hearts and I loved them so much. And so I didn't really talk to them for a while because it's like they kind of just went on their own path, like doing their own thing for their own family. And so that was already kind of in play, like that was already kind of happening on this one scene in my life.
Sure.
And then we, of course, had the coronavirus pandemic that started last March of 2020. And at that time, my house, so like, it's just crazy because we were living in this house and we were supposed to go like in 2 weeks to spring break and spend time at my family's cabin with my whole family. Well, the pandemic hit, the schools got shut down. We canceled our family reunion at the cabin. We woke up one day and there was like a hot water leak under our house.
Oh, wow.
And so we go to turn the water on, there's no water. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So we left and we just like left because we were about to go to Georgia, go up to Georgia anyways and be on this property. So we left and my parents were actually up there. So we met them up there at the cabin and they like came home back to Florida the same night, like the next morning after we got there. And we quarantined at their cabin for like an entire month. Right. So just in like the matter of like 2 or 3 days, like our whole world was turned upside down. My kids' school was down. Like we left our house, like took like our basic belongings and basically got out of town. Like just left the house, just took off, turned the water off and just hit the hay. And we were there for an entire month by ourselves pretty much. I think we had one friend that came up for like a few days with her girls after being up there for a few weeks and going cuckoo because our kids had nobody to play with. And then, when you're like quarantined with your family and you're in the middle of a pandemic, so there's like this fear aspect to it,
stuff comes out.
Oh, things come out, girl. And I'm telling you, and that's where like the anger and rage just completely resurfaced. I remember one day being there at the cabin and my kids were like bickering or something. And, it's just like, you can only take so much. So like, when you have siblings, sometimes they fight. And it's like, I always try not to like buy into that, but it's just what happens, like it's just a part of being a parent. So, I have been trying to navigate all of these conflicts with them and then just being stuck there with them. Right. And it just got to be so much where I just remember one day, Jolly, I lost it. Like I went into this like fit of rage.
Yeah.
And I was like screaming and yelling. And luckily we're on like out in the middle of the woods. So it was like, I actually could scream and yell and then nobody's calling the cops on me because there's nobody out there.
All right.
But I remember I was like barefoot and I just took off down this, like, there's like a dirt road. And I just like had no shoes on and I was crying and I was angry. And I just walked barefoot like down this dirt road and I was yelling at God, like, just take me before they're teenagers. I can't do this. Like, I don't want to be around for this part. Like, I can't do it, God. Like, just please take my life before they're teenagers. Right. Like I am like telling God to like take my life before they're teenagers. Like, and just screaming that I hated them and I hated this and I hated everything. And I was just like, I just hit this breaking point of like, I just can't do this. And it was just, man, I'm like, wow, what was that? Like you come down from those elevated emotions. It's like, whew, what was that? What was that?
Sure. Yeah.
And so let me just rewind a few months before that. I had a good friend and she's always been a Christian and she had posted about having this Christian mastermind group where they were going to study this book and me. And I said, I feel so much resistance to this, but I'm going to do it because of that resistance.
Wow.
And we went in there and I would show up to these meetings. And I had a couple other Christian friends that had kind of seeped into my life. At the time, like I was still I was teaching yoga. I was doing all these things. I had a couple other Christian friends. So I invited them and then we'd all go to these meetings together. And then my other friend had turned from the new age and she was in that meeting. And my husband was going through a career change at the time. And actually the mayor of our town at the time, his wife ended up joining this mastermind group. And, my husband was, like I said, very antagonistic about things because he never got his questions answered. But one day I said to him, babe, just come with me. Just come with me to one meeting. Like, just come and see, because he knew these people too. And he knew they were great people. So he comes with me and he's just kind of sitting in, on it, whatever. And then we like split up into like small groups, and the mayor's wife, she was in our group, and we were just kind of sharing about how he was about to transition to a new career. And, we had some money saved up, but there was still some, there's always that anxiety when it's like the unknown,
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, Jolly, this woman, she stopped right there. She prayed. She prayed over me and my husband in that moment. And it moved both of us to tears.
Yeah.
You could just feel like it was just so different because there was no like her trying to manifest some power, her trying to have some will upon us. She literally was like showing us how to surrender it to the Lord.
Wow.
And just this woman who didn't even know anything about us just prayed over us, prayed over my husband, and we're both like sitting there in tears, like me and him both, So it's like when people are like hearing that Holy Spirit and they like bless that upon you, right? It's like you can't not feel and acknowledge like the emotion that we were both hit with.
Yeah.
Like this authentic, just genuine desire for our family to find the goodness and for God to like bless his hand upon our family and bless. So we're quarantined, and my husband, he doesn't have a job. We have money in savings. Like we're okay for a little while, and he had been trying to get a job in medical device sales, which the pandemic shut down that hiring. He'd already had a couple interviews. We're like, oh no, I guess you're not doing this now. And so another girl that was in that group, her husband actually does career consulting. And so my husband had kind of reached out to him a couple of times about a professional resume and a couple of things like that. And while we're quarantined, he says, hey man, you have a background in sales and I'm actually looking for a sales guy. Do you want to, are you interested in maybe giving this a try? And Derek was like, well, yes, I am interested in this a try. So like, here we are in the middle of the woods in Georgia, and my husband gets a job just like so easily and effortlessly. And then, he's been with it for over a year now, and it's been a huge blessing. I mean, nothing but goodness has come from that. Our family, during the pandemic, like we decided that since our kids' school shut down, and we ended up selling the house and just kind of being nomads for an entire year. We went to like, 24 different states, and we lived in Arizona for 5 weeks and shed everything. I mean, we gave away furniture. We got rid of like 90% of our physical belongings. We got rid of our house. We were not around our spiritual like community that we had been around for so long. We traveled and we hiked in all these national parks and forests and waterfalls. Like we went all the way north and then all the way west, and just stayed in Airbnbs for like a month at a time. And just really got to go and explore like this God's world, his creation. Right. And just see these amazing things, and just these amazing, like just all these things. We got to just like be in the presence of God in his creation, at the same time as like shedding everything physical pretty much that we had. We had like a suitcase and, for a year. So we did that for an entire year, and so.
Wait, really quick. So the mayor's wife prayed over you at this Christian mastermind thing. And she just really loved you guys, right? She didn't even know you, but she just prayed over you guys, full of compassion. And so at that moment, did you guys accept Christ, or what happened right then? Or you just were just thankful and, just saw a different side of Jesus that you couldn't believe?
Well, for me, it didn't happen overnight,
Okay.
It was a process. It's almost like they say peeling an onion, which I don't want to use the onion because it's like,
no, but I
get
totally
the idea.
get it.
Yeah. So it's like, well, there's that, like I said, I had this checklist that I had been building in my back pocket, right? That was just another thing to put on that list. There's all these checks about things that I thought were like started to become like, in my eyes, like negative about the things that I was doing, like the stress it was causing, the jealousy, the envy, the money, basically people like really just wanting to have financial gain with all of these practices and turning it into a business. So there was all these checklists of negatives, right? And so on part of that list, it became a checklist of the positives of Jesus, like my friends who I love, them accepting him and preaching the gospel of Jesus, and me going, this woman not knowing me and like pouring more love and intention into my family than anybody that I really knew at the time that was really just showing up like that. And then these other Christian friends that I had that were like, I had this idea like, oh, they're judgy and da 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 da, and they weren't that. Like my friends that were Christians, like that was not my experience with them at all. Another check mark, right? Shedding all of my stuff and not being around that for a long time. Check, 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 right? You just start having these checks. And I did get curious, like my friend, like I said, at first, he like some of the stuff he would post, it would like trigger me. I'm like, triggered. But I would still like research videos like, well, what about this? And what about that? Like I started to seek and dive, and so it was kind of like an unraveling, of all the things that I didn't feel like were serving me. And then a building of all of this evidence, because it's like, until we really have evidence of something and we, it's like, we can feel it maybe, but sometimes our rational minds, like we have to have that like evidence. And my husband, like he is very much that way, like super high intelligent, like I said, guy, and has read like thousands of books and just always diving into things. And so, on his own accord, like he was starting to read books too, and he was starting to dive into things too. And he was starting to notice like there's a pandemic going on, and what are the things that are being suppressed? It's all the godly things. The family is being attacked, gender is being attacked, sanctity of marriage is being attacked. Our children, they're coming after our children, our health, all these things, and then you look at all these countries, like we felt like, there's something taking over our country that's not altruistic. And if you look at all these communist countries, they're not allowed to believe in Jesus. Like they're not allowed to own Bibles. They can get beheaded. Even in Cuba, you cannot be a Christian in Cuba. Like that's real life. That's, that is a real life thing. In China, you cannot believe in Christ. So you look at all these controlling countries that don't allow freedom, and they take away Jesus. They take away the Bible. You can die. You can die for that. And he's not a dummy. So he's like, looking at all these things going, we're just like checking off the marks, and then, for him too, like you start looking at the historical evidence, these archaeologists, like they are uncovering proof and evidence of the historical events of the Bible all the time, all the time. And so we're still diving into that stuff. Like we went to bed last night watching, all these historians and archaeologists and biblical experts that are like, proving the Exodus and how that happened, and the Egyptian and the Hebrew interpretations of that, and like what these people are really finding who have spent like decades digging into this stuff, So there's a lot of physical evidence, historical evidence. I never realized the Bible was more like a history book, and you start to look at this historical evidence, it's there, like there are, what is it? The Iliad and the Odyssey. There's like 20 eyewitness accounts, and it's one of the most historically accurate things that, according to our standards, right? And then you look at the resurrection of Christ. There are like hundreds and hundreds of eyewitness accounts that this actually happened. So if you look at things that we see as being historically accurate and go, oh, there's 20 eyewitnesses, this is very accurate. And then you look at the resurrection of Christ, and there's like 10 more times the people that like saw this happen, eyewitness accounts. How do you deny that?
Sure.
There's so much evidence, it's not like science and Christianity are separate. Like science legit like is backing this stuff up. And so having all that evidence, having the experiences with these other people that are Christians who are not these judgy, mean, rude people, reading the Bible, diving into the Bible, having our own experiences, like God coming to me saying, get your kids in line with Jesus. You're putting them on a path to hell. And me like weeping, all these like things just kept on happening. And I'm like, I'm just surrendering. I'm done. Like, this is it. This is where we're going. Like, and then, like he got his own evidence. I didn't push this on him. This was a collective thing that we worked towards together.
Oh, when you said that you didn't push it on him, you didn't push it on your husband.
I mean, I'm not going to say that there wasn't a few tough conversations that were had.
Sure.
Because he definitely had a really hard time releasing some of his Buddhist philosophies. Like he would circle back to that all the time. And I'm like, I get it, but you have to understand the Buddha came before Christ. So they didn't have a savior yet, right? So they were doing these works with good intentions. They were. But when Christ came, the game changed, right? Because they thought they had to do all these work, all these sacrifices, and all these things had to happen in the Old Testament. When Christ existed, his crucifixion, like it took all that on for us. All these spiritual works, that he canceled all that out. We don't have to do the works now, right? Yeah. And so, it's kind of like when I started to see all that, I was like, oh, okay, so Christ came and did that, but he came after Buddha. So, like Buddha was a man, like we can't worship the man, right? So like worshiping these men and these false prophets or whatever, it's like at some point that just wasn't enough. And I'm not going to say, like I said, there weren't some conversations, but I was never like giving him an ultimatum. Like, if you don't believe in Jesus, we're getting a divorce. It was never like that. Mm-hmm. I'm just like, babe, like you say these things about Christians being judgmental, but then I started naming like all of these really good friends that he had. I'm like, what about this guy? What about this guy? What about these people? The things you're saying is not who they are. They've been your friends for years and never been that to you. He's like, good point.
So, sure. So then after a while, would you say that he came around? I'm sure he sought the Lord as well, and he came around, or how was that journey?
Yeah, for sure. So, like last December, we had come back to our hometown for the holidays and rented an Airbnb here in town. And, I just felt like the Lord came to me one day and said, Jill, your kids don't have a relationship with Jesus Christ. You're basically setting them up on a path to hell because they don't have a relationship with him. And I was in the fetal position, like crying on the bed, like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I can't, it's like this moment where it's like this come to Jesus moment for me. So we started going to church. We started going to church, and we went to church like every Sunday in the month of December. And of course I go to church, and the one that we went to has like this beautiful, the music. It's kind of like they say like the rock concert ones, but like there was one specific girl who would sing this song, and it just burst my heart wide open, where I'm just like weeping, the whole time. I would just weep the whole church service. And I did that for the whole month of December. I went to church service with my family and wept. Wow. And while we were there, my husband and I were both like, yeah, this is where it's at, and we still didn't get baptized, and we were still I think there was still some undoing that had to be done, with our programming, but at the same time, we were both ready to receive Christ at that time.
Yeah. You said you were crying. What made you cry? What was it about Jesus that was so different from all that you've experienced in your life?
Well, I just felt I think as a mother, I felt honestly horrible for deceiving my children on one hand, but then all the pressure of all of these spiritual works, that lifting from me was such a game changer. Wow. I can't tell you, when I finally realized that I didn't have to do this yoga practice to be saved. I didn't have to meditate and do breath of fire and alternate nostril breathing and juice every morning and be a vegan. And I didn't have to do all that anymore.
Yeah.
To have peace in the Lord, I was just
you could breathe.
I can just get rid of all that now. I don't, you know what I mean? And I'm not going to say that right away. I just was you know what I mean? It still took some time where like I still believed and I was like diving in, but then I would kind of get pulled back to this way, right? Because then, you know, a lot of my friends were still into that. So I'd go visit a friend and then like she's pulling a card. Oh, I'm gonna pull a card. I'm like, what's the harm in this? You know, and it's like, so it is very easy to like when you're still so attached to those things and you're still attached to that community, very easy to get sucked back in. And that did happen to me for a little while. So like I'm saying, like December, we were in the church, we left, we weren't going to church. We like, you know, we're back up at the cabin and rented another cabin in North Florida. So for another 3 months, we weren't like stabilized in our own space. And I kind of got pulled back into some of the new age stuff a little bit. I honestly did, because I still had all these objects in my house and, you know, I kind of got sucked back in for a little bit, but I was definitely like feeling like I am a child of God. But then I was trying to figure out like, is all of this against God or is just some of it against God? Or, you know, I was just really trying to work through it, like, and see where, if any of it still fit, you know? So I was like really diving into Jesus, but also like trying to see, does this fit here? Or is yoga still bad? If, you know, is this bad if I'm thinking about this while I'm doing it, or if I'm devoting my practice to Jesus, like where's the line, you know, where's the line? And so it took me a few more months to kind of really figure that out. And like I said, like we are truth seekers. So we just kept diving and we kept looking at testimonials from other people that came out of the new age and really diving into some of these people who had, you know, they had done some of the legwork, so to speak. Like some of these people that like were heavily into the new age, I like was coming across these people who had done a ton of legwork. They had dove in to the roots of some of the practices that I was into, the people who brought these practices here, what they were connected to. And I got to tell you, like, after looking at that stuff and like completely shedding my ego around it and humbling myself, going, there's some pretty dark roots with this stuff. You know, some of this stuff is like very tied to Satanism, and like I literally had no clue. Like I just had no clue. I never would have knowingly danced with the devil.
Wow. Yeah. You know, I love when I hear you talk, Jill, I love that you say, like, even though it was uncomfortable, I leaned in, you know, that talk that you had with the mayor's wife, like it was uncomfortable. You didn't want to, but you just leaned into that which was uncomfortable to you. And I see that that's one of your strengths, you know, even though it's uncomfortable, because you are a truth seeker, you're leaning in, you're pressing into it, you know, and I think that's so important as people who are truth seekers. I think it's so important that we have to ask questions. We have to wrestle with the things that we don't understand. Because otherwise our faith is dead. We won't really have a story for ourselves. And I believe that God wants us to wrestle with him. God wants us to ask tough questions. He's bigger than our questions and he wants to answer them, right? What would you say about those things?
Oh yeah. I mean, how strong would our faith be if it was just easy?
Yeah.
How strong would our faith be? We wouldn't have the faith. We wouldn't have the wisdom. We wouldn't have dove in. You know, like my faith is so strong and I'm so on fire for the Lord now because of that wrestling, because of the suffering, the mental suffering that I've gone through. I mean, I'm losing friends right now. People that I've been friends with for years are like unfriending me and like,
Wow.
sorry. And it's hard. It's super hard. But at the same time, like I'm going to tell you, like, as soon as like, I'm going to say probably within the last 2 months, I got completely was like, okay, what else do I have in my house? Like I went through my kids' rooms. Like if I'm finding any of these things that are just kind of slipped through the cracks, like I'm throwing away all my singing bowls and whatever I have left, I'm like, it's out of here. Right. All of these spiritual books were still like in my garage, got rid of all that, you know, and the more that we like shed everything that's not him, he just is like, hey, here I am. You know, and then my daughter was like, Mom, how come we're not going to church anymore? And I was like, oh, my bad. So we started going to church again and getting rid of more stuff. And then, you know, and then as I was getting all this stuff out of my physical space, for the first time, I was able to actually read the Bible. Because before I tried to read the Bible and I'd be like, like falling asleep, like can't understand it. But all these other spiritual objects that we hang on to can really cloud that relationship. It can really cloud that connection. It can really murky our eyes, like our ability to see, read, understand. So the more that I cleansed this stuff out of my physical home, I was actually able to sit and read the Bible and to gain understanding from it.
Wow.
More people were coming. It's almost like that faith where you just have to take one step at a time, and the Lord keeps showing you like, oh, I'm going to take this step, and then this is going to come in. Then I'm going to take that step, and now this information is going to come in. And then I'm going to take that step, and then this person's going to come into your life and knock your socks off. And then I'm going to, like all these steps, you just take a step, and then you take another step, and then you take another step. Like I had thought I had everything out of my house and went through and like filled my trash can up again. I'm like, Lord, this stuff just into every inch and crack and crevice of your life if you let it. And I'm telling you, like, so once I feel like, I think everything's out. I'm pretty sure everything's completely out of my house now. It took a while. Like that's 7 years of like spiritual items that I've been shedding for over a year. But I'm going to tell you like, and then we all got baptized, and I think the shift in me happened just a little bit before that. But my rage, Jolly, like I have not had a rage attack on my kids since I got this crap out of my house.
Wow.
Freaking out on them. I'm not just like over the top getting all like flustered about little things. And I didn't have to do works.
Wow.
To get.
I love it.
And my sonny and my daughter, they're like, I'm just like, wow, I'm not angry right now. Like I would be triggered big time by that. Like even in like their messy room, like I'm in there handling it differently than like, you know, and they're just like, dang mom, yeah, you don't do this anymore. You don't like just go in your room and slam a door and scream. Like you're not doing those things. And I didn't have to meditate to stop doing that. When in fact, like I said, for 7 years, I was doing all the works, but I was still a rageaholic, not like all the time. And I'm not like trying to paint this picture like I'm always a monster, right? Like my husband and I, we weren't fighting, and like we're not in a big fighty like relationship. It's not like that, but it would just mostly be directed at them.
Yeah. You just get triggered, and what was inside came out. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So whenever like I noticed that mostly everything spiritual that didn't have anything to do with Jesus was out of my home, and I had, I'm like, this is the direction that this is like, we're 100% in now. We're 2 feet in, everything's out of our house. We're reading the scriptures. We're doing the things. Like Jesus just took it. He took that rage. He took that anger. Not to say that I'm like, never get a little bit upset. Like I still am very like, I will be authoritative when I need to be authoritative with my children. I'll put them in their place and discipline them. But at the same time, it's not this level of extreme anger and rage that's hurtful to them.
Sure.
It's more of like a level-headed discipline versus a flying off the handle rage moment, And that was like, for me, the biggest shift out of everything, because that was the most meaningful shift for me. Because like I said, that's why I got into all this stuff. I want to be a better mom. 7 years. If I hadn't gone through all of that, done all those things, gotten all these empowerments and practices and blah, 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 and then everything was just fine, I would be believing in all of that. But because I went through all that and I'm still that person, it made me go, oh, well, the answer is obviously not here, or I wouldn't still be this person. Right? So how strong is my faith now? Because I have walked through all that. Like I used to cuss like a sailor. Like talk about, they say, oh, because I did bartend for quite a lot of years when I like was going through college and stuff. My mouth, girl, I'm talking even just a few months ago, every other word is like a curse word, Like I haven't even tried not to curse through this interview for however long we've been on this thing. And 4 months ago, there's no way I could have done that without using foul language every 5 words.
Sure.
And it's not even, I don't even have to try. It's like that just cleaned up, like anger gone, level-headed, just, and then that surrendering to the Lord, like, gosh, man, like these burdens, like I would like try to be this healer, like people would come to me with stuff. And like, sometimes I'm just like, I don't have the answer, My kids are fighting. I don't know what to do right now. If my kids start fighting and I start to feel frustrated, I will stop what I'm doing and I will out loud start praying to Jesus and be like, Lord, come into their hearts right now, Lord, be their words and like, help me with this because I don't know what to do, God. This is in your hands. And within a few minutes, it's like dissipated and I didn't have to freak out. I
Yeah.
just give it to him. I
Yeah.
just give it all to him and he takes it and he takes it and he takes it. And and I had a lot of like shameful things in my past that I had done. And I gave it all to him.
Amen.
And I didn't have to carry that anymore. I didn't have to carry any of it. I didn't have to feel bad about it. God's not like, you're a bad person because you did this, this, and this. Like, it's not a shameful thing. It's just like, there is nothing, no matter how dirty the things you've done, how bad you've been to people, how you've betrayed, lied, cheated, whatever you've done, it doesn't matter. God will never stop loving you. There is nothing you can do to make him love you less, no matter how bad it is. And when you decide to give it all to him, he'll take it all. He will just take it off of you and he's got you.
Wow, that's so good. I think to myself, I love Jesus because we are just allowed to be in him. He can handle everything about us. He can handle our rage. He can handle our anger. And he says, come unto me, all you who are heavy laden, full of burdens, and I will give you rest, right? We just have to come, just like what you said, and surrender the thing. Surrender, bring everything that we are, our mess and all, come to Jesus, and he exchanges our heavy burden for his light and easy yoke. That's his promise to us. And that's what he wants to do, right? I love that God doesn't call us to do, right? Because in his word, he says we can't, it's not by works that we get saved, right? It's just by accepting the free gift of his son, Jesus. And we are sanctified, we are justified through our faith. It's as simple as just trusting God, trusting Jesus, and surrendering, right? He's so beautiful. I love that we can just be. That's all he wants us to do, is be, to rest, to abide in him, and he will do the work in us. I love Jill, as you talk, I think to myself, you are so bold for Jesus. And I think that's why Jesus chose you, right? Because he knows when he gives you something, it's excuse me, but it's going to be like balls to the walls with you. You are just going to take what he gives you and go to the rooftops. And I love your story. I love what God has done with you, and what he's doing in you. What I would ask you is, in our society, especially today, where there is, this is my truth and you have your truth, right? And I'm not gonna rain on your parade, and I'm gonna stay in my lane. What do you say in that world, in the society that we live in? What do you say to someone who is really searching for the truth? How do they find it when there's so many truths? How do you really find the truth?
That's a big question. I think sometimes we have to hit our breaking point. I don't know. I think that some people, they might have suffering, but it's not deep. It's not cutting deep enough to look for something else, right? Some people just have to be on a hamster wheel for a while, and they have to have something that just takes them to their knees.
Wow.
Asking God to take my life, to take me from my children. I was brought to my knees. Like, no meditation practice was helping me not feel like I didn't want to be around for them. Wow. As a teen. Like, you know what I mean? So like, what is going to bring you to your knees? Wow. So I hate to say it, but I do think that with deep suffering and being brought down to our lowest point, and mental suffering and anguish and mental torture, like, we almost have to be brought down to our knees and humbled.
Yeah, that's good. I forgot who says this, but there's a quote that says, "Whom God uses greatly, he wounds deeply, you
Mm.
know, and it's so true. I want to ask you, Jill, since finding Jesus, you shared a little bit about how life has been with, with your friends kind of disowning you, but how has life been um, since you've found Jesus, since you accepted Christ, you and your whole family have accepted Christ, gotten baptized? How would you say life is, and the truth, the reality of it for those who have just who are seeking Christ, who is kind of nervous or scared, or I know a lot of people think when you accept Christ, everything is going to be roses and your life is going to just be completely different all of a sudden, and it's just going to go from glory to glory to glory to glory, right, until we see Jesus. Tell me, as coming to Christ, as a mother, as a wife, recently, how is life since you found Jesus?
Well, I mean, life, it's still life, we're still on the plane of suffering. We're living in a realm that is reigned by darkness and reigned by Satan. This is like his playground. And I'd love to just be like, oh, it's just like a garden of beautiful flowers every day. But here's the thing. It's never going to be that, it's never just going to be always flowers and roses. I mean, right now we're in the middle of a pandemic. My friends are getting sick left and right. Like conflict comes, people have been passing away. There has been still a lot of suffering. Satan is being successful in a lot of ways right now with all his evil plans, in attacking humanity, turning people against each other, and not wanting the truth of Jesus to come out. He didn't want that. He didn't like it at all. So I'm not going to say that just because you turn your life over to Christ that, oh, it's just amazing now, and we're just going to go pick berries and laugh and giggle. There are those moments. There's a lot of challenges that'll come to you, but there was already so many challenges before. So challenges are there, whether you have Jesus or whether you don't have him. For me, what the difference is that carrying those challenges on my own back, of not just myself, but me as like this light worker healer, right? I would carry those challenges that they were having on my back as well. I'm a fixer. Like, give me a problem and I'm going to have a solution for you in a couple minutes, and we're going to just work through this, and I'm going to go here and do this. And like, I have your answers, right?
Yeah.
But that's also just so hard sometimes. And so what's so beautiful about Christ and the Lord and the Holy Spirit is now, instead of facing those challenges on my own or taking those burdens on, I realized that I can just take them and just put them right at Jesus' feet and just like, here you go. Here you go. Show me the next step. Lord, come into my home, and like the peace of not having to know it all, not having to figure it all out, not having to handle everybody's problems, like knowing that if somebody passes away and they have that, like, I don't have to have that burden about it. Like, they are saved in the Lord. Like, I don't have to carry it anymore. Like,
yeah,
he came here. That's why God sent him. He sent him here to carry that for us. And so, no, it's not going to be easy, girl. Today, I've had 5 challenges before we did this interview because Satan was so pissed, hissing and clawing at me today because he was like, oh, you're going to say these things? Oh, okay. Then how about this? How about some grief? How about some conflict? How about this?
Wow.
I mean, I literally cried for probably like 20 minutes before before I went and like brushed myself off to like get ready for this interview.
Yeah.
It's not like just things are just, but he will bring people into your life. He'll bring new sisters of Christ. Like, I reached out to you. You started praying for me. I had another friend call. She started praying for me. I have a couple of prayer groups that I'm in. I could really use some prayers right now. Death and sickness and conflict are all coming into my life. Lord, take it. And guess what? Like, I was able to go in there, wipe my face, wipe my tears, fix my my makeup, brush my hair, take a few deep breaths, give it over to the Holy Spirit, and I'm able to show up for this interview as if it seems like nothing's going on in the background of my life, but there's a lot of things going on, you
Yeah.
know? And so he gives us our strength and our moments of weakness, and like really will, like when you call that in, I just feel like, you know, I guess there's one community that's like, man, I don't like this. And then there's another community that's fully embracing me, who I am, where I'm at, relating to me, praying for my family, and covering my family in protection. And so that's been the difference. And I also feel like my dreams are very clear. I feel like God speaks to me through that all the time. And, you know, I actually just had a dream the other night, and you know, this topic of the snake, I have been having these conversations like the Garden of Eden and the snake coming in and the deception that comes with that. And that really plays into a lot of some of these new age practices. But, you know, I had this dream, and of course, like, I am not going to just go pick up a snake. Like, that's not my jam. My son would totally do that, but that's not my jam. But in this dream, I was actually in this tent, and there was a lot of snakes in the tent. And I just walked into the tent, and they were venomous snakes. And I was kind of calm, and I was just picking
Wow.
them up by their heads and like handling them. And they weren't not able to bite me. They weren't even really trying to bite me. Like, they couldn't. And I just felt like God was like, it doesn't matter who comes at you, what spiritual realm tries to attack you. Like, you're good. Like,
Yeah.
I pray that armor and protection over my family every day. Like, we leave the house, we're like singing the Armor of God song. We're praying on the way to school. Like, every day I'm diligent now. I wasn't so diligent at first, but now I realize how diligent that spiritual protection that he offers us, how needed it is. So I stay constant in that. And I know, like, God's got me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. You know, I think walking with Jesus, being a follower of Jesus, it's a fight, right? I think so many of us are passive Christians. We just think, oh, well, I just, will believe in Jesus and go to church and sing my songs, and pray my little prayers. It's more than that, it's a fight. It's a daily fight. It's a daily battle in the spiritual realm, right? It is a battle. Our battle is not against flesh and blood, right? It's against the principalities and the forces in this dark world. But it is an absolute fight. We have to take action. We have to, I was just reading in Colossians, and I was just circling all the action words. It said, like, clothe yourselves or get rid of impurities, greed, envy, lust. Clothe yourselves with compassion, right? All these action words. And I was like, wow, God, it's so important for us to realize that we are in a fight. We are in a battle. And the battle belongs to the Lord, right? The victory is already won, but we still have to fight daily because we are here on this earth and we have to fight against the enemy. So it's important as Christians that we realize that we stop being passive in our own lives, in our walks with Christ, and we put on actually the full armor of God, and we go out and do battle, and do the things that Christ has called us to do, And speaking to that, Jill, I wanted to ask you, what do you feel or sense that God is calling you to do next? Like, what is coming down the pipeline for you that you feel in your heart that God's calling you to?
Service.
Okay.
Service. Like, I told you, I bartended. I was like in the service industry for a long time, while I was going to school, and even when I was like, learning about nutrition and teaching yoga. Like, I've always had a heart to serve. But now being humbled in a different way, I don't think service is just one thing. It's so many different things, like being obedient,
Yeah.
right? When he tells us to do things. And he's giving me a lot of instructions lately. And, there's a great community here. They're actually working with the homeless community, that they're the people that are like homeless for like long-term homeless. And they actually work with like 20% of the homeless population who they have just been homeless for a very long time due to like mental illness or some reason why, they're unemployable. Because a lot of people say, oh, well, all these jobs are available. You're homeless. Go get a job. There's no excuse. It's just what I'm learning is that it's just not that simple for all of them. And you look at the way that Christ served, he would put his hands on lepers when it was illegal. These people had like these disease and it was illegal to touch them. And he would put his hands on him, right? He'd put their hands. And so Jesus was not afraid of illness. He wasn't going and hiding out and doing all these things, right? So I'm telling you though, I mean, I know what's going on right now and I have a lot of friends. My family was affected by the, COVID, and I have lots of friends that have it right now. So that might look like dropping off supplements or a bag of fruit on their porch. That might look like this guy's walking down the street. I can see him battling demons and I'm saying a prayer for him and like releasing those demons to the Lord. I'm not releasing them. I'm not taking that on. I'm giving it to the Lord. These homeless women who literally, you could just be so vulnerable with them. You can tell them they want to hear your stuff because guess what? You tell them your stuff, they like love you more for it. They're not judging you. You can be so vulnerable and just making friendships with them and hearing their stories and like sitting with them, in their mess and just being like, I don't have an answer for you other than I can pray for you and I'm here, and volunteering at church, volunteering at school, like I'm here to serve. I'm here to serve and to be obedient, whether that's saying a prayer with somebody that you pick up on the side of the road, like some woman walking down the street, or you're, and it's not to like boast about doing these things, but this is the way that Jesus served. He served the lowest of the low. So it's about humbling myself, which is another difference I will say really quick in the new age community. It was all about, let's raise our vibration. Your vibe attracts your tribe. If somebody's not vibrating at a certain level and you are around them, it can lower you. That was also one of the things I sort of bought into, but at the same time, like didn't feel, it's like I was almost like in a battle with myself where it's like, I kind of bought into that whole idea, but then at the same time, I was like, it just doesn't feel right to me. Like something about that just doesn't stick with me. And so like that idea, I have just completely thrown out the window. I don't even care. I'm like, I don't care who it attracts. Like, I don't care if you're addicted to like crazy drugs right now and you need somebody to like give you a hug, like whatever, it's like humbling yourself. It's not about you have to raise your consciousness and your vibration to like be this guru. It's about, what, this girl is suffering right now and she needs help. And that's what God would do. And he's actually telling me to pray for her and to like help her and just doing whatever that is and being obedient in every moment, no matter what it is.
Wow, that's so good. I love that you're so new in your faith, but yet you hear God so clearly, and that you basically are just obedient to him every single day. Every single day looks different. He's telling you to do different things, and you are just an open, broken vessel to be used for his glory,
Yeah, sometimes it's hard. There was a couple of times, like I remember a few months ago, I was like walking the lake and he told me to go pray with this woman. I could tell she had cancer and I just chickened out. I prayed for her, but I was too scared to go over and approach her and say, can I pray with you? But I didn't, I kind of listened to, there's sometimes where you like,
it's like half listen,
half obedient. You're like, all right, well, I'll say a prayer, but I'm not going to go up to them and say it. So I'm not going to pretend like I'm completely like, don't have any barriers or walls still, like they're still coming down. But I think the more that you just trust in each little step, he's like, all right, I'm going to trust you with a little bit more. I'm going to trust you with a little bit more. So obviously I wake up every day with my goal to be more obedient. I'm not going to pretend that I'm like, woo, perfect at it. I feel like it's another process of trusting. Even like Moses was chosen, but he was always doubting. He's like, me? Like, I don't even speak well. You want me to do these things like, and so God just will keep nudging you, so.
Yeah, no, I love it. Like even in the half obedience, it's okay. God still, you're still good. You are still dearly loved by God. You are still enough. And he's going to just keep going with you, and he's still going to call you, and we're still going to follow. So I think that's what's beautiful about God, is he accepts us where we're at, even in our mess, even when we daily mess up. And he says, you're okay, dear. It's okay. Get back up again. Keep on coming, and that's how he takes us from glory to glory to glory, right? It's a forever pruning. It's a forever refining, right? Until
For
we
sure.
meet him one day. Jill, so I just want to, before we end things, I'd love for you to tell us how we can connect with you. If someone wants to talk with you one-on-one or personally, how can they get in contact with you?
Well, I'm not like having some huge platform right now on social media though. And my name is Jill Smith. So that would be kind of a hard thing to find me on social media. But yeah, I can just give my email address and that could be a way. So it's Jill M as in Mary Smith 333 at gmail.com. So that'd probably be the best way right now. Yeah, because I'm not really like, some huge platform where I'm like, oh, this is like my thing right now. It's just that, yeah, I would love to be connected with other people and to serve as any sort of guidance or whatever I could be to anybody that's looking and searching and has questions. I don't always have the answers, but
Sure, no.
but I've been finding them in the scriptures, and sometimes that's where we have to look, and just look at God's word and see where he wants us to how he wants us to answer through his word, not always us.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jill. What I'd love to do, if you'd be so kind as to just end us with prayer. If you could just pray for those people who are just maybe searching for the truth. They're still in that journey where they are searching, they're maybe confused, they're down a path that they think is right, and just to pray for them. If you could lead us.
Absolutely. Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you today just broken and humble with our hearts wide open, Lord. We know that you see so many that are just searching and searching and so many who have been deceived. And we understand that. And we understand that you want nothing more than for your children to come home to you. You want nothing more than for them to be redeemed, Lord. And so we just ask now that you recognize them, you see them, and you open their hearts. You open their hearts to the truth. You open their eyes wider to allow them to see the deception and how it's crept in, and you allow them to push away any shame or guilt or remorseful feelings that they may have attached to the deception, Lord, and just show them unwavering evidence. Show up, allow Jesus to come into their hearts and lives, show himself to them so that they cannot deny the realness of his love, Lord, and just continue to break those walls down and let Jolly and let myself and all of your warriors just continue to shine for you and to humble ourselves to you, God, and continue to give you all of the glory for every good deed that is happening through you and every heart that is opening to you, Lord. We know you want nothing more to rejoice in heaven for eternity with all of your children, Lord. Bring them back to you. Bring them back to you, Lord. Thank you so much. In Jesus' mighty, mighty name, thank you so much for answering our prayers. Amen.
Amen. Jill, thank you so much. It was such a joy, such a privilege and an honor to interview you. And till next time. I'm sure you're going to be back on my show again. So I'd love to have you again, but take care.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jolly. Thank you.